certain key city decision makers and to allow them to ask questions and provide comments. No decisions or recommendations on the proposed development will be made by this committee. Any proposals for development you hear or see today are in a very early conceptual stage of planning without the city's departments of planning and public works having had the opportunity to review them. Accordingly, discussion of specific details of any proposed development at this time is premature as they are subject to change prior to the formal submission process. In light of the informal and preliminary nature of the presentation today, the public has been invited to attend both via the Zoom webinar platform or streaming live on YouTube and learn about concepts associated with this proposed development in your city. But public comment will not be offered at this time. Any person attending or any person interested in commenting on the proposal discussed today is encouraged to contact their elected representatives and also take advantage of the numerous opportunities to speak before the Planning and Zoning Commission when, if such occurs, the development is formally submitted for the city's consideration. I'd like to thank everyone for joining tonight. And Mr. Newberry or Mr. Vunich, can I get a roll call of attendance?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Garitano.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Galani. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Mayor Boland. Chair Beatty.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight we've got the preliminary design concept for an expanded parking area for the new community church and recreational activities associated with it. Would the Department of Planning like to elaborate on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all the attendees as well. We do appreciate you fitting in an extra meeting into your busy schedules, so thank you again. In preparation for tonight's discussion, the Department of Planning did prepare a packet of information. That information included the agenda, the bylaws of this particular committee and how it operates, several items from our town center plan, the regulating plan, which is the land use map, the chart of permitted and conditional activities associated with each of the land use districts shown on the regulating plan, and then an aerial photograph to provide some context where this particular site is located relative to the overall city and in terms of town center. So hopefully those materials were helpful in orientating you to the site. And along with the information provided by the department, the applicant, petitioner, in this case, New Community Church, provided a rendering indicating their design concept for this 4+ acre site. And before concluding, the department would just like to know a few facts about the site. First and foremost, it is 4 lots that form the overall tract of land that's under consideration. Those 4 lots are approximately 4.5 acres in size when combined. The property is currently zoned C8 Plan Commercial District. That zoning was approved by the city of Wildwood in 2007, and it allowed up to 6 commercial type buildings on that particular property, but the buildings collectively could not exceed approximately 40,000 square feet. Under the update of the town center plan that was completed in 2021, the property is designated workplace district, which allows for a range of commercial activities, as well as parking areas under a conditional use permit and recreational facilities under a conditional use permit. And finally, the property is not contiguous to the current location of New Community Church, but it is slightly to the west and on the opposite side of Manchester Road. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, if there are any questions for the departments, Public Works or Planning, several of its representatives are here tonight, as along with the city administrator, Mr. Cross, and we'd be glad to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Councilman Garitano?
Yeah, I just had a point of information. regarding the comment that Mr. Vunich said that parking was conditional, but maybe I may have misunderstood, because when I was looking at the permitted uses under workplace district, a park and open spaces, scenic areas, but that's under cultural institutional. So maybe that's where I might have some confusion there, but it says it's permitted. So I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
And certainly, Mr. Garatano, I'll do my best to provide that. So what I'm referencing is the table that indicates list of land use activities, and it's dated 2020. So again, this property is designated workplace district. And so the department anticipated the facilities, since they're not under public ownership, to be recreational facilities in the workplace district, which is a category about halfway down the list. And that shows it as a C, or a conditional use permit. And then parking areas are both in the downtown district, and in this case, the workplace district, conditional. So again, conditional use permit. Now, again, from the perspective of the department, there's some interpretation here. And as the petitioner develops the concept, that may dictate what actually is needed in terms of a zoning action. If the recreational facilities are considered primary use, then the parking would be accessory. But when the church started this conversation with Mr. Brown, Mr. Cross, Mr. Newberry, and I think what it was driving the request was more so the need for additional parking to meet the growing congregation size at New Community Church. But certainly we can look at public, or we can look at park and open and scenic areas as well. So as I say, as the concept is developed, we'll have a better idea as we move forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Are there any further questions from the committee? Councilman Garatano?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're open for discussion right now, I'll just relay what I've, kind of can come to a conclusion based on just feedback from folks in the community, is that it is very, I spoke to the resident closest to the site.
You cut out there for a second.
So let me see if this is better. So I spoke to a resident over in Grover Crossing, trustee over there, and that was very favorable from what what we're being shown here. And it's often what I often hear from people that they'd like to see versus other types of developments. So I think the New Community Church, being an active player here in our community, is looking to put this right there for the congregation. And I'm interested in hearing too, if, the folks from the community would have access to some of these uses, because we do get a huge demand about pickleball courts in our area, and we don't have any. I know the city's working on building a couple of courts over in New Community Park, but I would imagine that those will be busy too. So this is very close to the community. So if someone from New Community Church would address that question about, how could people take advantage of some of these accessories here, that would be great.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz or Mr. Kerberg, would you like to kind of tell us elaborate on your plans a little bit?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you so much. I assume you all can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. This is Jeremiah Kerberg. I'm pastor administration over at New Community Church. Really appreciate all of you taking the time to meet with us tonight. I know this is probably beyond office hours, and certainly something you guys probably do, but really appreciate the time that you're taking to meet with us and to allow us to engage with you on this opportunity and what we're seeking to do. So yeah, thanks for even a couple of those questions and comments as it relates to what we're looking to do. And yeah, this project really did begin for New Community Church as we are kind of coming out of this COVID pandemic of and realizing in the midst of that we are growing. So over the last 18 months, we've grown 36% as a church. And so we are busting at the seams and doing everything that we can to keep up with the growth that is happening within our church organization. And so the conversation did initially start with, well, if we are going to expand our building, not only for the current need, but for the future, anything that we do because of the square footage that we have available on our current property, we are eventually going to impose on our parking lot that we have, which is already full. And so we are going to need additional parking, and that's not only for the current need, but looking towards the future. Now, that began a process by which we began talking to really all the neighbors around us, on the west side of us, on the east side of us, on the south, southwest, and southeast side of us. There's property, as I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have looked at. So we began those conversations with our broker. I'm not sure if he's on the call here. I don't see him, but Mr. Dave Randolph, he's our broker, and beginning to kind of investigate all of those opportunities. This current property that's being looked at here in this proposal tonight is the one that became most available to us at a rate that we could afford, and was most situated, again, not as ideally as maybe a couple of these other properties would be, but in a way that would be profitable and useful to us. With really the landscape of the new streetscape going in, there's a crosswalk that directly connects us to that space, which in previous conversations we've already talked about, wanting to put in lighting there and a crossing guard. So I'll kind of answer that issue right up front. That's something we would be very favorable to. That's something that we would see as mandatory, even for our sake. We don't want to be in the newspaper for some kid getting hit and walking across the street from a car to our church. That's not the kind of press that we would want. And we would do everything to work with the city and with the community to ensure that that's not an issue to the best of our abilities. We have some law enforcement that go to the church, and we would certainly want to work with whatever would be available and engaging that kind of opportunity on a weekly basis for our services and extracurricular activities as well as would be necessary. So, but then, as we looked at what became available to us on this property, it's quite frankly more space than what would be needed for just our parking. And that was not seen by us as a negative, but actually a very positive. And that's what motivated me to reach out to the city to say, hey, what do you hear from the community as opportunities for us as a church within the center of town center to reach out and to serve our community? Largely over the last 30 years, we were a church startup historically. And I'm sorry, here, I'm getting a call. Sorry about that. We are a church startup that's been here 30 years. And, as church startups go, sometimes, they become so internally focused that we really don't look out to the community because it's just survival. Well, we're a well-established church now, and we are looking to kind of the transition of the next generation of our church, and we want to really grow in this area of reaching out into our community to serve our community. And so that was an important part of this, that as we began investigating of what would be helpful, not just to our own church internally, but externally, what would be helpful to our community as a value. If you came into our church and saw the front wall of our church, you would see our statement of purpose is to glorify God, to make disciples, and to love our community. Well, quite frankly and transparently, we need to grow in that opportunity to love our community. And so we want to do creative things, things that we can be a more visual and more obvious service and reaching out to our community to serve them. So as we investigated that, that's where some of these other ideas came from. During the era of COVID, my wife and I and several friends, we got kind of into this hot thing called pickleball. And we got interested in it and started playing and had a lot of fun with it. And then when, we live here in the community, we're 5 minutes from the church, and we struggle finding. We often have to go down to Baldwin, other communities to find pickleball courts. And as soon as I asked that question, it was interesting to hear from several other people as well as the city that, why doesn't Wildwood have pickleball courts? And for us, it became, well, that may be a very obvious thing for us to provide to the community, as well as, something that we would have a lot of fun of with, even within the church, and perhaps providing tournaments and doing some fun things like that, where we could just be a community amenity in that sense. And so then it just kind of developed from there into hearing in the master planning of the community of Wildwood, what are some of the things that are high on the list for the community that they desire, and that would be helpful. And so we heard of things about not only pickleball courts, but the pocket parks and some other amenities like that. Certainly, this may be a popular or unpopular opinion, but when I want to go get a cup of coffee, sometimes I have to wait in line at Starbucks for 10 minutes or longer, and sometimes just the drive-through, I just drive away because it's not worth it, and I just go to my office and get a cup of coffee at my office. I think desperately is needed is a coffee shop in Wildwood, and one that's maybe not a chain, and one that I have to drive 30 minutes or more to get to what might be considered a more kind of upper level coffee provider. And I would also argue that most of these coffee places, my scene is sidewalks and asphalt. I don't know of one except for 40 minutes away that I can go set up my laptop, get some work done, get a cup of coffee, and work in a scenic environment. So we feel like we're very well positioned with this property to provide some of these kind of amenities, again, not only for the value and what it would bring to our church community, but to the broader community of Wildwood. And so hopefully that's helpful just to kind of understand a little bit of the background and the vision of where this all kind of developed out of. And then Pete with Vessel Architecture, he's on our team. We've been working with him since, for the past decade, I think, almost now, through some renovations of our church property and more inside the church of things that we need to do. We're working with them again on this property, as well as some other things that we need to do with the church. But yeah, certainly, hopefully, Mr. Councilmember Joe, that this would help your question directly as it relates to how this would impact our community. We want to welcome the community to our property. Just, bottom shelf. We want them there. Right now, we don't have a lot of opportunities to do that. We want to create those opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Kerberg. Councilman Garetano?
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, I agree with you. The drive-through is very popular at Starbucks. It's amazing how busy it is. And that just shows people love their coffee. So I do want to say, first of all, thank you for being a great partner with the city. I want to take that moment because New Community Church is a neighbor to City Hall. And we recognize that, New Community Church steps up, like when we have Celebrate Wildwood, you are a staging area for us. And, I love what you're saying about wanting to be, to grow, in the community. And so, your response has reinforced my thoughts. I mean, I don't even have any more questions or comments. I think this is a great and wonderful idea. And I don't even see a reason anymore to have any further discussion other than to just say, move forward, keep moving forward through the process. And, unless someone else has any questions, I think sounds great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to that effect. This is Jim Bolin.
Sounds good. Okay, is there a second?
I'll
Looks
second
like
it.
Councilman Garetano seconds it. No, I think what you have is a great idea here. I definitely feel like the south side of Highway 100 is lacking, and I see that you've got the playground area front and center, and we've got all of our parks are up on the north side of 100. There's a little something in Cherry Hills. I think there might be a little playground in Lake Chesterfield, but for the kids on the south side of 100, there's not much. And a playground that would be available for them to use, not to mention the pickleball courts, I think that would be great.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm actually in Lake Chesterfield. That's the community I live in. I'm not aware of a playground over here, so you'll have to tell me where that's at.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that there is one. I just thought there might be one.
No, I don't think so. We've got a pool. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
So, Chair, do you have to just do a voice vote on that motion, or is there any other?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cross has a comment.
Sure. Mr. Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kerber, Mr. Schwartz, it was a pleasure when we sat down with you all several months ago and kind of fleshed this out. And when you asked the question in terms of what would the residents like to see, and it's great to see that you took our suggestions to heart in terms of the pickleball courts and that refreshment stand that we talked about. I think on weekends or after church or whatever, when folks come across the street and sit down to have a cup of coffee or whatever is great. I'm curious if you all are still considering one of the things that we talked about was up on that new parking area, potentially putting in an electric vehicle charging station when folks come either to church or to visit this side and so forth, be able to charge their vehicles, bring more people into town to do that. Is that still something that you might be considering?
Yeah, thank you all for your time and your enthusiasm. I appreciate that. Jeremiah, do you want to handle that? You want to field that question?
Yeah, I certainly could speak to it from a very non-technical standpoint. We have not looked into what the requirements of that would look like, nor the cost or anything like that. But certainly something we would be interested in looking into, and what that would require of us, and there would not be opposition to it. That's probably the best way to say at this point. We're just not simply far enough along the process at this point to know and to really look into those kind of details. But yeah, Mr. Cross, we'd certainly be open to looking at what that would be. I know we have a number of people within our church and our congregation that drive Teslas and other electric cars. So I certainly think that that's it's not going anywhere. Well, if anywhere, it's going to become more. And so that may be a very viable thing for us to consider for the future.
Well, Mr. Kerberg, I will offer to you the services of Mr. Brown and I. We are fast becoming experts in the field of electric vehicle charging stations.
Okay.
We have spoken to 3 vendors, and we have one that we still want to talk to, and we will be presenting shortly information to the Administration and Public Works Committee that Mr. Garetano chairs. So Rick and I have learned quite a bit. So if we can help you in that regard or steer you to a potential vendor or 2 that you'd want to talk to, we'd be more than happy to do that, sir.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up with you on that too, Mr. Cross. Would love to know some more about who those vendors are and how that kind of network is building out, because we're going to only build more of them, of course.
We'd be happy to do that because we're looking at putting one here along Main Street in Town Center. And I think the more that we have in the city, we'll just bring more people to the city and have them stay in the city either for lunch or whatever. So Mr. Brown and I'd be happy to help you in any way you need.
Appreciate that. I don't have too much else substantive. Be happy to answer any questions that you all might have about the site. Appreciate Mr. Beatty's opening remarks about it being preliminary. And to that end, just so that you know, we've engaged Grimes Engineering for the civil design on the site, and they've begun their initial work with MSD. So as NCC does its due diligence prior to closing on this property, we're making sure that we engage all of the right approvals and review processes. Those are also preliminary like this meeting.
One quick question I had, maybe for Mr. Vunich as much as anyone. Is there a possibility for lighting the pickleball courts? Or
Certainly. Again, remember, it's the workplace district, so there is greater flexibility for a lot of different types of lighting and activities in association with them.
I mostly ask because I've been playing tennis over at Lafayette before and had to call games because of dark.
Oh.
So.
Well, under our outdoor lighting requirements, almost all outdoor lighting in association with athletic activities is 10:30 p.m. The kind of the close. So in most instances, that's pretty reasonable. Again, remembering that there is residential properties immediately to the south.
Right. No, I realize that. Looks like there is some trees between there, or at least I don't know if that's planted already or proposed, where all of those tree marks are south of the courts.
Yeah, great question. Most of that is existing, and it occurs to me that we would assume that any sort of lighting for surfaces like parking or sport courts we'd want to make sure we were at 0-foot candles by the property lines. And so we'll look into how that works into the budget. And if there's even thinking about charging stations, if there's a significant amount of electrical improvements as we develop the site, it may be a no-brainer to want to do that. And if any of you were curious, the number of forecourts in our research is the minimum number to support a small tournament. And those typically happen even in a half a day. So you may have a morning session and an afternoon. And if lights work after review with your colleagues, then that might make them even more useful. So we'll look into it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yeah, appreciate that input.
Yeah. Councilman Garetano?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for our purposes, as a development and zoning review, I think the feedback that you're seeking has been provided, and I would imagine you'll get into more details later on in the process if it has to go to planning and zoning. So Unless there's any other substantive question, I was just gonna say, I think we can motion to adjourn and, you got clear direction on how you feel, how this committee feels. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you all
Thank you
very
all.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your input.
Mr. Vunic, I guess before we